Good afternoon, our readers, our subscribers. Today in our live section, we have with us Dr. Bhaskar Chatterjee, who has been associated with the steel industry since 2004, when he served in the government of Orissa as the Principal Secretary for Steel, Mines and Coal. He is currently the Secretary General of Indian Steel Association, and he is involved with large number of concerns and issues in the steel sector. So today we actually have the right person to discuss about the steel industry post-pandemic. So we welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Sir, the first question I would like to ask you from the press release that was issued by Indian Steel Association on the steel demand, right? So presently the growth was about 5.1%. Till February we had that growth, but now it is expected to touch as low as minus 7.7%. Okay, so what are the plans do you think the steel industry should have to mobilize the demand? Should we still depend on the automobile industry, infrastructure, construction, or should we look at creating steel demand in other sectors as well?
You know, it's very difficult for steel industry to create a demand for itself. Most industries would find that very difficult to do. We are very much dependent on the fact that the economy itself must show signs of revival. There must be a good stimulus package from government. And our revival of the steel industry is interlinked with the auto sector, the highway sector, the construction sector, where, of course, the consumption of steel is maximum. We are working actively with all of these sectors, connecting with them, seeing their trends and analysis. And I think now, as we speak today, Shakuntala, with the relief package, the stimulus package released by the government in the very recent past, some of those measures are likely to kick in as the days go by and the notifications are issued. And I'm really hoping that as a result of that, the trickle-down effect, sectors of the economy will begin to show what I would call green shoots. Our economy, our industry is linked, and we are trying to now slowly, with the opening up, resume our production in bits and parts. And when we see that the other attendant industries are also opening, the economy is slowly beginning to surge again, I'm hoping the demand will pick up.
Okay. So you're saying it is expected that very soon we will have, there will be some kind of movement in the demand in a positive way.
Yes, it will, of course, be very gradual.
Yeah.
But then, of course, we must think positively and come out of the very dark days that we have been through.
Right. Sir, what about the migrant workers? They will be unavailable because most of them have returned back home. Okay, so how do you think the EPCs or even like should come up with various packages to bring back the migrant workers back to work? Because you have been associated with the government working for very long time of your career span. So can you give us some kind of your opinion on how you think it should work in favor of getting the migrant workers back to the to their work again?
You know, the way I see it, this is a bit of a pull and push situation. Why is migrant labor going back? If you analyze the reasons, I would say we can put our finger on 2 or 3 points. One is that in the big cities where they were working in various areas like gem cutting in Surat, or whether they were in construction, or wherever they were, because most of that activity stopped, they were literally rendered homeless, cashless, and they came to a situation of near starvation. And all that the government did very constructively, and many voluntary associations, NGOs also contributed. But a sentiment has developed that this is the time for them to go home.
Mhm.
So part of their desire to go home is one, of course, straightforwardly their situation, economic situation. The other is I see long amount of sentiment that has developed, that home is where we must be at this time of crisis. These are the two basic drivers of their going back. And at this point of time, it's become such an emotional issue that I don't think we can stop it. It's better to facilitate it, to see that, they are taken care of. Now, the pull factor. How do we pull them back? This is
Right.
what's pushed them out.
Yes.
And you rightly put your finger on this idea. How do we develop packages which now will bring them back? Now, in the agriculture season, there is also work available in the villages. The post-harvest operations and the early sowing operations are now going to go on. So they will find attractive work in the rural areas. So in order to entice them back, as we begin to open up, we must begin to give them more and more attractive packages to slowly bring them back.
Right.
We cannot restart anywhere even at 50% with the gradual re-influx of labor coming back. Also, I see that, we were dependent on migrant labor, but around our factories, some of the untapped labor resources actually exist.
Mhm.
And many of our, they're a little bit more expensive than them, but this is a time of crisis. So we are tapping the nearby villages, all the other areas where people are available to try and come on board in the absence of labor. So we're putting out our search, doing our best, and I suspect it will still take 2, 3, 4 months. But over that period, we will gradually wean them back.
Okay. Okay, sir. Sir, and with the migrant labor's issue, workers' issue, another problem that the steel industry faced this time was they had no option, but some of the blast furnaces had to be closed down. Like in the news we got, even Tata Steel, Kalyani Steel, Hospet, a lot of them, they have closed down. Even JSW, their Dolby plant. Okay. And being in the business, we know shutting down of the blast furnace and again starting it, not only it's time consuming, it is also got to do with the cost factor. So do you think now with starting of the blast furnace, there'll be a surge in the price of the steel in the end product? Will the cost be taken care in the steel price in coming months?
See, we are caught in what you might call between the devil and the deep sea. It's a crisis in which we have to be very careful. In terms of blast furnaces, almost all the blast furnaces, if you shut it down completely, then it's a very difficult process. We only do that when we want to sell it off. So
Right.
what's happened is we've reduced our production to almost 10%, even below 10%, just to keep the blast furnaces at some very, very minimal equivalent to closure, but technically not shutting it down completely.
Okay.
So it will take a little bit of time, a little bit of expenditure, but not as much as shutting it down completely. That's part one. Will it affect the price of steel? I will say it will affect the cost of production of steel.
Right.
This is one part. But price, we cannot, this is where the problem is. And I can't really discuss price openly in an interview. But the general trend in pricing, we have to be very careful of the market demand.
Right.
If there is demand, we can slowly think of price increase. Otherwise, we have to take what we can at this time and slowly, slowly, as the economy revives, opens up, and then look at the market and regulate our prices in the way that the demand also goes up.
Right. So you are also in touch with the government of India, say Ministry of Steel. Okay. So I just wanted to know one thing. In the news, we have heard that the Ministry of Steel as well as Government of India are planning to start a lot of their construction, infrastructure-based work. Okay, so How do you think this starting of the infrastructure work, which had to be stopped because of this pandemic, will again create a demand surge, and how quick it will be to pick up with where we stopped, say, in January or February?
Yeah, that is in fact the most crucial question. This is the most crucial question. And it's not so much dependent on the Ministry of Steel because steel doesn't really do any infrastructure work. What will happen is in the Ministry of Transport, Highways, Railways, transport, of course, relating to production of cars and all the rest of it. Those are, and of course, let's say urban development, where you allow construction work to begin. Much of rural housing projects, which
Yes,
recently got a
yes,
boost in the stimulus package of government. All of these are likely to kick in slowly, of course, but gradually. And with that, that is in fact the key question. What will be the pace of opening up? What will be the pace of resuming these? And we are constantly writing to the government, sending memorandum to try and open up the demand factor as much as they can. The key to the entire revival is the creation of demand.
right.
And in some ways, it is linked to the stimulus package which government has given. And of course, the capacity of our private sector to generate and come back on its own.
So, what other packages the steel industry as a whole you think can expect from government of India to stimulate its movement and its production?
Well, if you look at it, one, of course, I spoke just now is about the major construction
Right,
projects.
right.
Uh, that's part one. But then we also need some help in terms of the worry and concern about other countries dumping steel into India. And
Absolutely.
of course, that our north north neighbor China is always poised to flood markets. They in fact are having an over demand situation, and they are likely to push steel in our direction very quickly. So we have asked the Ministry of Commerce to ensure that that sort of dumping doesn't happen, and to take as many measures as they can to ensure that we get trade protection. We've also asked for some help in terms of the VAT, the border tax. We've also asked that the old lesser duty rule now should actually be done away with. We've asked for a complete ban on the imports of seconds and defective steel. Some of those measures are very much under consideration of government. And I'll mention a couple of other ones which are very key because railways is such an important ministry for us. So we've asked that there should be concessions on railway freight. Some of the items of, instead of advance credit, we should actually get some relief, in terms of 60 days credit for these months. And then we should also have perhaps a 25% discount for at least 6 months on the movement for steel exports, particularly. So to various ministries like this, we have asked for specific reliefs. We are pursuing with them actively. And I do feel that government willy-nilly will understand that although there might be some revenue loss to them in the near term, but over the medium and the longer term, the revival of industry will in fact create good tax revenues for the country as a whole.
So, but don't you think that these tax relief, specially because tax is the fund which the government creates, it's their kitty. And now, with the government who needs to start on their infrastructure projects, they will need that kitty because already they are spending a lot for this, taking care of this pandemic situation. Okay, true, there is a Prime Minister Care Fund, but a lot of other additional expenditures are already going in. So, giving tax exemption at this point, don't you think it will affect their kitty to put in money in the infrastructure work?
Yes, that is in fact the dilemma which faces government or any enterprise when it runs.
Right.
And to some extent, therefore, there has been a call for many economists that some of the deficit in our budget should actually be monetized if that's possible. See, it's a chicken and egg situation the government is facing today.
Mhm,
If you cut taxes, there's less input into government.
mhm.
If you don't, over the long term, if industry doesn't revive, from whom will you collect tax?
Absolutely.
So this is a very what you might call a balancing act. Government, I must say, has been very, very cautious, careful, and in a way also reformist in its approach. And we anticipate that these very positive steps will be continued. We don't expect very large tax concessions, but little bit of relief, little bit of postponement, little bit of help us at this point. Once we begin to track up, once we begin to come into full production, there will be ample internal revenues for government.
Right. Sir, you're regularly in touch with the big boys of the steel industry, as we call them. So, do you think what kind of steps they are taking to bring back that zeal within the workers? Because there has been speculations of job cuts, salary cuts, and everything taking up. There's a panic situation, and we are seeing places where there has been already salary reduction, laying down of employees. Okay, so can you throw us some light how our big boys are planning to handle, because they will show the direction to the smaller ones?
Well, let me assure you, Shakuntala, on this point, that we are really trying our best to conserve our workforce.
Okay,
The workforce is the vital limb of our whole production activity.
absolutely.
So anything that hurts them hurts us. So we have not announced, unlike, let's say, a service delivery or many of the, Swiggies and Zomatos and so on, and Amazon, and so much of them have actually got rid of by issuing pink slips. We have not taken recourse to any such measure. Therefore, you will not read steel industry dismisses so many workers. That's not been our attitude at all. Of course, we have lost the services of migrant labor, but that's an inevitability. On top of that, if we start taking away our own laborers and workers, then we will be in serious trouble. So I don't think, from the industry standpoint, that is really on our agenda at the point. But it is also equally the duty of the employer to see that government instructions on safety and the health of our employees is followed to the T,
Right.
even at the risk of lower production.
Mhm.
So and in fact, I was in a video conference with all the members of our association yesterday, and a lot of concern was expressed there of how do we ensure that there is social distancing, how do we ensure that workers don't overcrowd in normally in the blast furnace areas or SMS areas or wherever the areas are. There's a lot of crowding of labor. So how do we ensure that they don't do that? What kind of safety equipment can we ensure? As it is in the steel industry, there's a lot of safety equipment that we give our workers.
Right.
In terms of gloves, in terms of the hats they wear, in terms of the protective equipment they have, the overalls, their gum boots, all of these are given in any case. Now, how to overlay that with additional PPE, that has been our anticipation. So the health and safety of our workers, even at the cost of some production activity, is something that we are really prioritizing.
Right.
Now, when workers see a safe environment, when their families are assured that when they are in the factory, the workers, then a lot of that will also help to create a good, positive environment. And many of our laborers who've left us will also want to come back.
Right. So we feel very proud to see how our steel companies have come forward and donated benevolently in the PM Care Fund to take care of the pandemic. And even though they have been undergoing the crisis for past few years, but they have been very, very benevolent. And that really makes us feel so proud of being in a sector which has been so proactive. But as the Secretary General of Indian Steel Association, what is the way forward now? Post pandemic, what are the areas we need to focus, how we need to change our thought process or bring any kind of change in the business activities to go ahead with the in the coming years.
Well, first of all, let me share a piece of news with you, Shakuntala. Yesterday, we had our elections to the presidentship. You would recall Mr. Narendran
Yeah,
had demitted office recently.
right.
So, Mr. Dilip Umen, the CEO of AMNS, has now taken over as of yesterday with a 2-year term. So that's a happy augury for all of us.
Absolutely.
We have a regular president on board now. And I think working in tandem with him will enable us to formulate these strategies on how do we take forward our production. This is not a challenge for the steel industry only. It is a challenge for any major sector of the economy. As I said earlier, it will be a slow, careful process. On the one hand, we have to see that we produce, concentrate on the markets that are available to us. We do find some sunlight in the area of exports particularly. So we have asked government to ensure that the ports are declogged as quickly as possible. Maximum number of railway sidings are available to us. We must say from the government side, there has been a great deal of support. The earlier problems we were facing with interstate and intrastate movement of wagons, trucks, all those snags have been completely eliminated. And therefore, the free flow of goods, even the free flow of our raw materials has begun in right earnest. Because these channels have been cleared, a certain amount of momentum has been generated. In the conversation that I had with our leaders yesterday in the steel industry, there was a feeling of guarded optimism, if I may use that within quotes, that things are now going to improve with the passage of time. We will live in a post-COVID world. All of us will learn to live with that.
Yes.
So whatever we can do, like you and I are doing now, conversing
Absolutely.
over a video conference tools. So more automation, perhaps, more careful looking at labor practices, making sure that the health and safety is taken care of, ensuring transport for even our workers to come to factories and so on. So gradually building up a positive environment, working with other industries, working with government. This will be the new credo. This will be the new message. And this is how I think we will slowly break the shackles that the world pandemic had imposed upon us.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. In middle of all this, your discussion with you or your interview has been very hopeful, and we definitely look forward for a much brighter time in the months to come, and definitely in the coming year. Wish you a very safe time in Delhi. Take care of yourself, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Shakuntala. It's been a delight and a pleasure, and we'll continue our very warm association in the days and months to come.
Surely, sir. Thanks a lot. Take care, sir.